And right now it's time for that time when we have our special guest. Tonight's special guest is a repeat performance from Dr. Bruce Lipton, cellular biologist. We have had a tremendous amount of requests to hear once again the life story of the tiny building block of life, the cell. We welcome as our special guest on The Beat Goes On, Dr. Bruce Lipton, a cellular biologist. Now that's a big title, isn't it? What is a cellular biologist and how did it all happen?
Well, basically, how did it all happen is the first easy step, because when I was very young, about second grade, I had an opportunity to look in a microscope first time in school. And what I saw in there was like this amoeba moving around and a paramecium. And to a little kid, there was something smaller than me. Yeah. And all of a sudden I thought, well, okay, look at this, there's this life stuff. And I saw them as actually like little people moving around. And that enthusiasm carried over until ultimately I ended up in graduate school studying cells and now using electron microscopes instead of light microscopes and going right through the cells and seeing how they're made and how they work. It was exciting.
Since you started, I mean, it's a rapidly expanding field, isn't it?
It's a revolution and an evolution at the same time, because when I was training and when I was learning all the information about biology, so I actually was teaching medical students, I was teaching them what most students are getting in school today, that genes control your life. That you don't really pick the genes. You can't change the genes.
You get the cards.
The cards are dealt. And then that's the problem, because then you say, well, oh my God, you know, like there's cancer running in a family, diabetes running in a family, and then what does that make me? A victim. A victim, because if the genes control your life and you can't pick them and you can't change them and you got dealt that hand, then you have to play it out. Old vision. The new vision undermines that whole belief entirely, because rather than being the victims of our genes, there's a new field of science, which I actually got involved with over 40 years ago, before it was a field of science. It's called epigenetics. What we teach in school is called genetics. Genes control life. Epigenetics is a new science, and epi means above. Like when they say the word epidermis, that means the skin above the dermis. Epi is above. So I say epigenetic control. Literally, it says control above the genes. And all of a sudden, in the last few years, we now recognize that the way we see the world, the way we believe about the world should be, or our perceptions of the world, that is what controls the genes.
This victimhood that's grown up, that's in your genes. You're an alcoholic because it's in your genes.
Oh.
You're a gambler because it's in your genes, is not true at all.
No, it turns out that your beliefs control your life. And that's why all of a sudden, well, if you believe you're going to get cancer, if you believe you're going to get diabetes, that's already half the pathway there.
Now, you've discovered this all by looking at that wonderful little piece of building block of life called the cell.
Yes.
Tell us about how wonderful the cell is and how by studying the cell, you've come to this belief system.
Well, here's a very interesting truth most people don't know. Your body is not a one thing. I look in the mirror and I say, oh, there's Bruce looking back. And I say, well, that's one thing. It's like, no, your body is a community of 50 trillion cells. And every cell, this is an interesting fact, every cell essentially has every function that you have in your body. Wow. So I say, well, I look at my body, digestive, respiratory, nervous, excretory, even immune system. Every cell essentially has every one of those. So a true story, a cell is like a miniature person.
And there's 50 trillion of them. Trillion, does everybody understand a trillion? It's
no, you know, since there's 6.5 billion people on the planet, it's like thousands of times more cells than there are people on the planet in each one of our bodies. Cells found out that if they come together as a community, they can share awareness, so that a cell, you know, a community of 100 cells has 100 times more awareness than one cell. And so cells started to recognize that they could survive by sharing awareness. And also, it's the old phrase, two can live as cheaply as one. Well, 50 trillion can live a lot more cheaply together than as individual cells. So nature says it's more, you get more intelligence, more awareness, and more survivability by community. Here's what the bottom line story is. Conventional medicine sees the body as a vehicle, like a car. Anything that goes wrong with it, oh, it's the vehicle's fault. It's got, oh, bad clutch, bad brakes, whatever you want to say. It's the vehicle's problem. We now have recognized what medicine left out of the equation was a driver. that there's a driver in the vehicle. And it's just, look, you can get two vehicles come off the assembly line, perfectly exactly the same, and you give one to a mature driver and you give one to a hothead teenager, and you let them take those two vehicles out, and in a short time you find that, you know, the hothead teenager's vehicle is broken or in the junkyard and wrecked, and the mature individual is still driving their vehicle. It's like, well, wait, the vehicles were the same, it was the drivers. This is the new biology. We said the genes were programming the vehicle. Now we know that there's a driver called the mind. The mind is actually adjusting the genetics and the cells. And so if you're entertaining wonderful, harmonious thoughts, then you end up having a more harmonious life. And if you're in anger or upset or in fear and all these other things, those thoughts actually cause the destruction of the vehicle. So why this becomes important, we have to leave behind victim and get into, we have to recognize our responsibility, that we have a vehicle and we maintain the vehicle. If you eat well and take care of it and exercise it and work with it, it will last a long time. And if you drive it into the ground, it can die very, very fast. So we have to stop being people that blame our biology and say, oh, the genes and my family history, and start to recognize we're the masters.
For some time now, there's thousands of people who have had cancer who have tried to go on a new diet, a new way of thinking, and it hasn't worked.
Yes.
So why is it not working? There is
that's a great question, because it's like, well, everybody says, well, if it's just my mind, why don't I have the life that I want? Why did I end up with this if I was controlling it? And then I say, here's a fact that we left out of the equation. There are two minds that work together. One is called the conscious mind. That's the one that's like our personal identity, or connected to our spirit or our source. So Bruce is a personal conscious mind. And then we have something called the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind and the conscious mind are very different. The conscious mind is you. Your wishes, your desires, what you want from life. If I ask you, what do you want? Your conscious mind's going to tell me what you want. But the subconscious mind has programs in it. It's just like a jukebox. You push a button and the behavior plays. In fact, I always like it because some people say, oh, well, that guy pushed my buttons. And what does it mean? Well, all of a sudden my behavior was like out of control. Somebody pushed my buttons. In fact, that's because the subconscious mind's programs are not primarily in alignment with what we want, because the subconscious programs primarily came from our parents, our community, our teachers when we were very young. So now here's the bottom line. We only run our life 5% of the time with our conscious mind, which is our wishes and our desires. 95% of our life is coming from the automatic processor, the subconscious. And the primary problem is those programs came from other people. And that's where the disconnect comes from, because you say, well, I didn't want this. Yeah, well, 5% of the time you were actually going toward where you wanted to go, and 95% of the time you were going to where the programs were sending you. And we got the programs from other people, so we're living other people's lives. And once we understand that, then we have some power. But some people say, what do you mean I'm running my life 95% of the time with other programs other than what I want? I would see that. And the answer is, well, that's the sneaky part of the subconscious. The way the subconscious works is if the conscious is busy, the subconscious takes over anything from driving a car or having a conversation or doing your job. If you've done it before, the subconscious knows how to do it. You have to learn to use the conscious mind to rewrite the habits and the programs that are operating invisibly. And so we're really being programmed by other people, and our lives match their programs, not ours.